Chapter 15:13. At the same time, Patriarch Hua's sneer and ferocious expression froze. How is this possible? He saw that Luo Qingtong's sword light had blocked his attack. This was different from the attack he had used against Luo Qingtong before. This spiritual sword had gathered all his strength and was activated by a secret method. Its actual attack power was above that of an ordinary saint's attack. Luo Qingtong was only at the peak of the martial spirit realm. How could she have enough strength to fight against it and release such a powerful and terrifying attack? What was going on? Patriarch Hua's expression froze. What shocked him even more was yet to come. After the sword light blocked his sword light, it fiercely pressed down. With a bang, his spirit energy giant sword was knocked away by Luo Qingtong's sword light. It was knocked away. Patriarch Hua looked at all this with a shocked expression. He almost couldn't believe his eyes. This was impossible. This was definitely a dream. How could a martial spirit realm warrior be able to withstand his attack? Furthermore, he had even broken through it. Patriarch Hua was unwilling to believe this fact. However, the piercingly cold sword light that assaulted him caused all the hairs on his body to stand on end. Terrifying, too terrifying. That Yi Jiao on the other side was simply a monster. Patriarch Hua had never seen such a monster like him. No, run. Run. The strong sense of crisis from the saint realm surged violently at this moment. Patriarch Hua suddenly let out a strange cry. He waved his sleeve and turned to escape. The lofty aspirations of wanting to kill Luo Qingtong had now turned into panic and embarrassment. After the sword light broke the spiritual sword that Patriarch Hua had shot out, its power was greatly reduced. With a flick of the sleeve of the Hua clan's patriarch, it was immediately shattered by the violent energy contained within. However, just when Patriarch Hua thought that he could successfully escape, another powerful and domineering sword light suddenly caught up with him and chased after the broken sword light. In an instant, the Hua family's patriarch was hit by the first beam of sword light, which had shattered into pieces. It turned out that Luo Qingtong had once again swung her sword in that sword light. The same biting cold and powerful sword light killed Patriarch Hua in an instant. Bang! Patriarch Hua's body fell heavily to the ground. Until the moment of his death, he didn't know how Luo Qingtong had released such a powerful and terrifying attack. He had broken through his attack, even his saint-level defense, and killed him. Boz! Luo Qingtong's figure floated in the air. The young man's black figure was in this space where the wind and clouds surged and light shattered. Luo Qingtong's eyes drooped slightly. She looked indifferently at Patriarch Hua's body falling to the ground. Then, she suddenly raised her hand and waved her sword. Boom boom boom. Sword light that was not weaker than the one that had just killed Patriarch Hua shot out from the death blade in her hand. She waved it towards the surrounding walls and pillars. Luo Qingtong wanted to break the defense of this room and make the special boundary power in the Saint King's tomb ineffective. If it was her previous self, she would naturally be helpless. Chapter 15:14. Luo Qingtong didn't need to completely destroy this room. She only needed to break a few key points, and she could make the special barrier that shrouded this Saint King's tomb lose its effect. That spirit formation power should have been specially set up by the Holy King's soul to seal his corpse. Now, it was completely destroyed by Luo Qingtong. Boom boom boom. As Luo Qingtong's sword slashed out, the sealing power in this room quickly weakened. Let's go. Let's go to the exit hall. It's time to go there and get the so-called secret map of the fallen immortal land. At the same time, meet up with Yu Sihuang and the others. Lest they don't know what happened to me and worry for nothing. Luo Qingtong raised her hand to summon the little snowball that had shrunk. With a leap, she headed towards the exit of the palace. In the exit hall, when Yu Sihuang heard Feng Wuan's words, his face suddenly changed. How did he know Luo Qingtong's identity as the evil Dr. Ghost Eye? What else did he know? Yu Si Huang's pair of evil eyes stared at Feng Yuan. The latter had already made his move and didn't give him a chance to ask. Boom, boom, boom. Those blood-red vines violently attacked, and those people from the Ouyang clan and the surrounding clans all pointed their spears at them. A group of people rushed over, and Yu Si Huang's eyes were cold to the extreme. Bang! The energy around his body exploded. In an instant, his body was like a dragon. With a boom, his whole body rushed out like a storm and faced those blood-red vines. Boom, boom, boom. In an instant, his figure disappeared in the encirclement of the vines. Hu Zhongtian, Hu Fei, and the people from the southern mountain range also formed their own formations at this time. They fought back to back with each other, resisting the attacks from the Ouyang clan and the other clans. The people from the southern mountain range were more powerful. After all, they were the alliance of various sects in the southern mountain range. Every sect that had established a force in the western wasteland had at least one expert who had surpassed the sage realm to keep watch over it. Although they weren't as strong as Yu Si Huang, they were still barely able to resist those powerhouses from Wild City. However, the family whose side was slightly inferior. After all, Hu Zhongtian and Hu Fei had just recovered from a serious illness, and Hu Fei had been bedridden for more than 10 years. Although his strength had the help of Luo Qingtong and absorbed by Feng's power, it was still difficult for him to advance to the Saint Realm. They had indeed gained a lot from coming to the Saint King's tomb this time, but as soon as they reached the exit hall, they were ambushed by Feng Yuan and the Ouyang family. Even if there were gains, there wouldn't be enough time to upgrade them. Now, they were at a disadvantage against the people from the major families. Fortunately, Su Yu and the others resisted. The people from the heavenly diabolism who came to the Wild City with Luo Qingtong had received a lot of resources from the Voodoo sect and the Bai clan. They were completely different from when they first came to the Wild City. Not to mention, Su Yu had also contracted with the Thunder Beast with Luo Qingtong's help. The Thunder Beast was in a special period where it had gained intelligence and advanced to the Saint Realm. Luo Qingtong had eaten the purple heart-clear jade fruit. Chapter 15:15. This included the development of spiritual intelligence for this Thunder Beast. Now, this Thunder Beast had advanced to the Saint stage after being fed with a large amount of resources. Its strength was even more powerful and violent than before. Boom, boom, boom. Under Su Yu's control, its tower-like body rampaged through the attacks of the various family forces. Its violent strength and huge body provided family Hu and Su Yu with the greatest protection. A Saint Beast? Or a Thunder Beast? Seeing the lightning beast in front of them, the people from the various forces were all stunned. Even the Ouyang family members were stunned. Thunder Beast. Is there someone on family Hu's side a beast tamer? With this thought in mind, the crowd immediately looked at Su Yu and the others. Then, they were shocked to find that these people did not seem to be from family Hu. Why were they on family Hu's side helping them? Were they not afraid of death? Family Hu's people were the target of public criticism. While the crowd was thinking this, Su Yu had already ordered the heavenly diabolism's people with a cold expression. Everyone, step forward. The heavenly diabolism's people obeyed the order and took a step forward in unison. Then, they took down the bags behind their backs. Including family Hu's people, the various forces looked at the heavenly diabolism's people in a daze. They did not know what they were going to do. Only Hu Yinyang, who knew a little about the inside story, knew what Su Yu and the others were going to do. They were probably going to use the things that their master had given them. As expected, they lifted their hands and opened the bag. In an instant, the scattered parts inside were assembled together. After a few breaths, the crowd saw something that looked like a long spear in their hands. However, there was no sharp blade. There was only a black hole that looked like a pipe. What are these things? The group of forces who were fighting family whose people and the thunder beast were stunned when they saw the things that Su Yu and the others took out. What kind of weapon was this? Why did it look so strange? There was no blade. Humph. I think these people are just deliberately mystifying things. This thing doesn't even have a blade, how can it hurt people? I don't even know where he found the fire stick. He purposely made it look so weird. An expert from the Ouyang family snorted coldly. However, just as he finished speaking, Su Yu's cold and murderous voice suddenly rang out. Release. As Su Yu's voice rang out, bang. 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 The Heavenly Diabolism's members had already aimed and fired. In an instant, the long spears in their hands shot out spiritual energy bullets. In an instant, they flew towards the people in front of them like a rain of locusts. What? Seeing the spiritual energy bullets flying towards them like rain, the people from the various forces and the Ouyang family were stunned. Was this thing really a weapon? Furthermore, the power and speed of these things that were shot out were not small either. It was no exaggeration to say that each of these spiritual chi bullets was equivalent to an attack from Heavenly Diabolism. If these attacks were launched individually, they would not be harmful to the experts from the various forces. They could disperse them in an instant. Chapter 15:16. There was a saying that a large number of ants could bite an elephant to death. Although the strength of Heavenly Diabolism and the rest was nothing to the experts of the forces who came to the Sage King's tomb, with such a concentrated attack, even if they were strong, they had to be wary. D***, what the hell is this? The experts of the various forces hurriedly dodged. However, the speed of the spiritual energy bullets was too fast, and they did not even take the long spears in the hands of Heavenly Diabolism and the rest seriously. It was too late for them to dodge at the last minute. Ah! Many of the people from the various forces screamed in agony. It didn't matter to some of the powerful experts. However, the disciples below the sage realm were all in big trouble. One by one, they screamed in agony as they were shot full of holes by the spiritual energy bullets of Heavenly Diabolism and the rest. In an instant, flesh and blood splattered everywhere. D***. Many of the weaker Sage Realm experts were also injured by the spiritual energy bullets. What kind of strange weapon is this? Quick! Don't let them shoot anymore. The experts of the various forces and the people of Ouyang family suddenly felt that something was wrong. The elite disciples that their families brought here for training were equally important. However, the strange weapons in the hands of Heavenly Diabolism and the rest were too powerful. Their attacks were not very strong, but they were able to shoot out countless bullets in an instant. Under such an attack, all the disciples below the Sage Realm that their family forces brought here would be killed, wouldn't they? The crowd no longer cared about the people of the southern region and rushed towards Su Yu and the rest like a swarm of bees. Seeing this scene, everyone in the Hu clan came to their senses. Quick! Protect them. Don't let them get hurt. A group of Hu clan's people suddenly surrounded Su Yu and others in the middle. They could also see that the guns in the hands of Su Yu and the rest were very powerful. Although they could not cause much harm to the experts, they were enough to make them wary and had no choice but to retreat to protect their elite disciples. In this way, the pressure on their side was greatly reduced. The people of family who thought so and immediately protected Su Yu and the rest with all their might. When the people from the southern region saw this scene, they immediately came over. They were in the same boat as family Hu, Su Yu, and the others. If the latter and the others were in trouble, they would not be able to escape either. Naturally, they would spare no effort. The crowd immediately surrounded Su Yu and the others tightly. There were so many forces outside, plus the Ouyang clan's people, but they couldn't break through their defense line. Seeing that Su Yu and the others were cooperating more and more smoothly with the southern region and family Hu people, the various family powers and Ouyang family members were so angry that they gritted their teeth. There were so many of them, but they couldn't do anything to the people from the southern region and family Hu. If news of this got out, people would laugh their heads off. However, they didn't expect Su Yu and the others to have such a strange method. Where did the other party learn these weapons and attacks from? If they had known that they had such means, they would have killed them long ago. Just as the people from the various forces and Ouyang family members were so angry that they were gritting their teeth, with a rumbling sound, a violent vibration was heard, and in an instant, the Hu clan and the people of the southern mountain range immediately let out cries of surprise and screams. Chapter 15-17. Huge and thick vines burrowed out from the ground of the grand hall like dragons and snakes. In an instant, they wrapped around a large group of people and rushed into the sky. A bunch of trash. Feng Yuan stood on top of a blood-colored vine. He stood high up and looked coldly in the direction where Yi Shiwen was. These people were all a bunch of trash. So many people against family whose people and the group from the southern mountain range, but they still couldn't do anything to them. Fortunately, she had absorbed some death aura and blood essence and cultivated some more vines. Otherwise, she wouldn't even know how she had failed by relying on these people. Feng Yuan's gaze was extremely cold. Her gaze swept across the people who had been tied up by the vines she had sprouted and pulled into the sky. Among them were Hu Yannyang, Hu Zhongtian, Chu Lingfeng, and the others. Mother. Chu Lingfeng hugged Hu Yannyang tightly and used his body to resist the binding and tightening of the vines. Hu Yannyang didn't have any power. If these vines used a little strength, she might be cut into 2 pieces. Seeing the painful expression on Hu Yannyang's face and the cold sweat on her forehead, Chu Lingfeng was anxious. He shouted at Feng Yuan, "You evil woman, come at me if you dare. I will never betray my master. You're not even fit to carry my master's shoes." Although Chu Lingfeng wasn't very bright, he relied on his beast-like intuition and keenly realized that Feng Yuan had a strong sense of hostility towards Luo Qingtong. If he said that, she would definitely target him. Then, Mother and the others would be safe. As expected, Feng Yuan, who had raised her hand to order the vines to tear Hu Zhongtian and the others apart, stopped her actions and looked at Chu Lingfeng maliciously. "Master. Yi Zhou. I didn't expect you to be her dog." No wonder she was so concerned about family Hu. Feng Yuan sneered at Chu Lingfeng. She had checked family Hu's information in the Ouyang family and naturally knew Chu Lingfeng's identity. She also knew that he was the one who brought Luo Qingtong to family Hu. Originally, they were still guessing what the relationship between them was. Now, the truth was revealed. He was a dog under evil Dr. Ghost Eye. He even dared to say that she wasn't even fit to carry her shoes. Feng Yuan hated it when people said that she wasn't as good as Luo Qingtong. Ever since she lost to Luo Qingtong in terms of medical skills, ability, scheming, she hated it when people said that she wasn't as good as evil Dr. Ghost Eye. The other party's dog was really courting death. "Since you're so loyal, I'll help you." As Feng Yuan spoke, she waved her hand fiercely. In an instant, the thin branches and thorns of the vines pierced through Chu Lingfeng's body. The vines were as thick as pythons and the thin branches and thorns on their bodies were unusually sharp. After those thorns pierced through Chu Lingfeng's body, large amounts of blood splattered out. Chu Lingfeng's body was almost pierced into a hedgehog and a sieve by those thin branches and thorns. Feng Er. Seeing this scene, Hu Yannyang, Hu Zhongtian, and the others all had red eyes. Chu Lingfeng. Su Yu and the others, who were lucky enough to escape, also had red eyes. Especially Su Yu. She was going to suffer just now. One of the vines had purposely moved towards her. Chu Lingfeng had pushed her away. Seeing that he was being tortured, her eyes immediately turned red and she wanted to rush up. Chapter 15:18. Seeing that he was being tortured, his eyes turned red and he was about to rush forward. However, he was held back by the people from the heavenly diabolism. No. Deputy leader, you can't go. The people from the heavenly diabolism were in great pain. Many of them came from the Blackfields mansion and were on good terms with Chu Lingfeng. In addition, they had been by Luo Qingtong's side for a long time. Even those who were not familiar with Chu Lingfeng knew that he was loyal to Luo Qingtong. Seeing that he was being tortured by Feng Yuan, they clenched their teeth tightly. But at this moment, Feng Yuan's strength was really too strong. The vines that were under her control were constantly increasing in strength. She had become the one who controlled everything here. If Suyu rushed up rashly, she would only be caught in the hands of the other party. By then, the heavenly diabolism would become a pile of loose sand. Humph. Don't be too anxious. Soon, it will be your turn. Feng Yuan's attention was attracted by the commotion over at Suyu's side. He turned to look at them and sneered. These people were so loyal to family who? Were they secretly arranged by evil Dr. Ghost Eye in Wild City? The other party really had good intentions and a good plan. On the surface, family who was attracting the attention of many forces in Wild City. In the dark, they had cultivated such a strange and powerful force. Once the Hu clan took over the Huo clan's businesses and cultivated their own resources, coupled with this strange force, how many forces in Wildland City would be able to resist them if they suddenly launched an attack in the future? By then, the name of evil Dr. Ghost Eye would be famous in the Western Wilderness. However, it was different from before. If Luo Qingtong became famous this time, she would definitely be in charge of the Western Wilderness and become the leader of the Western Wilderness. This was one of the reasons why Feng Yuan went to the Western Wilderness this time. However, Luo Qingtong's strategy was open and aboveboard. She wanted to develop her influence. On the other hand, her strategy was to scheme. However, all of them wanted to become the master of the far west desolate region. However, in the end, he was slightly better. Evil Dr. Ghost Eye was dead. In the future, the only thing that would spread in the Western Wilderness would be his name. Feng Yuan's smile was cold. He looked at Su Yu and the others, who were full of hatred, and waved his hand fiercely. Suddenly, those blood-red vines, which were glaring at them covetously, rushed towards Su Yu and the others with a loud bang. Feng Yuan wanted to torture them one by one. It made evil Dr. Gui Tong feel extremely pained when he died underground. This way, he could reduce the hatred in his heart. Boom boom boom. The heavenly die abolished the leader to evil Dr. Ghost by the Hua side of the Hua Wei evil doctor. The people of the southern mountain range and family who were scattered by Feng Yuan's attack just now. They couldn't gather together and couldn't protect Su Yu and the others. Looking at the scene of these blood-red giant vines attacking Su Yu and the others, in an instant, many people's hearts were filled with extreme despair. Once Su Yu and the others were all caught or killed by the heavenly diabolical vines, they would really have no chance of survival under the attack of Feng Yuan and the others. After all, without the support of Su Yu and the others' strange weapons, the Ouyang family and the other family forces would immediately recover and attack them together with the heavenly diabolical vines. At that time, they would really be dead. Was there really no chance at all? Chapter 15:19. Buzz. A ray of white light suddenly shone from the entrance of the main hall. That was a sign that someone had come out from the other passageways. But no one looked in that direction. At this time, it didn't matter who came out from the other passageways. In any case, they would either submit to Feng Yuan or be killed by them. Ouyang family head and the others didn't even look in that direction. They were just a few fish that had escaped the net. There was nothing to be concerned about. The most important thing was family Hu and the people from the southern region in front of them. As for the people from the other forces who had stumbled out of the passageways, they could keep them alive if they were happy, or kill them if they were unhappy. As the crowd thought this, their eyes were fixed on the blood-colored vines that were attacking Su Yu and the others. 10 meters. 8 meters, 7 meters. 5 meters, boom. The vines had already attacked Su Yu and the others. The top of the vines was like the head of a giant python, and they instantly strangled Su Yu and the others. Just at this moment, bang! A violent rumble rang out. In an instant, countless blood-colored vines flew out like exploding flesh and blood, drifting in all directions like rain. The shrill sound in the air was sharp and long, and it almost resounded through the entire main hole. The crowd looked in shock at the blood-colored vines that were rushing towards Su Yu and the others. They screamed and fell, bursting like rain. However, a figure suddenly appeared amidst this bloody scene. He had snow-white hair, reddish-golden eyes, and a huge body that didn't lose its noble temperament. The black-haired young man in black sat upright on it, and his eyes were as cold as ice. But the anger that was revealed in his eyes was boiling like fire. Feng Wan, how dare you touch my people? Luo Qingtong rode on Snowball, holding a sword in one hand and pointing the tip of the sword at Feng Wan, who was stepping on the blood-colored vines. Master! Seeing Luo Qingtong appear, Su Yu and the others instantly burst into tears. Master, are you okay? Everyone was both surprised and delighted. Previously, when they knew that Luo Qingtong was being chased by Huo clan's patriarch and separated from Yu Sihuang, Su Yu and the others felt as if the sky had collapsed. If it weren't for the miracles created by Luo Qingtong supporting them and convincing them that Luo Qingtong would be fine, they would have died with Luo Qingtong. Now that he saw Luo Qingtong, he was both pleasantly surprised and deeply moved. Yeah, I'm fine. Luo Qingtong's eyes were cold. Her gaze swept over the place where Chu Lingfeng and the others were. In the previous wave of attacks, Luo Qingtong's blood-colored vines had almost been cut to pieces. Even the vines that bound Chu Lingfeng and the others were no exception. Without the binding, Chu Lingfeng and the others fell to the ground. Yen Yang broke away from the vines on her body and ran to Chu Lingfeng's side. Feng Er. While crying, she wanted to pull the vines that bound Chu Lingfeng's body. But those vines almost penetrated Chu Lingfeng's whole body. Just a light touch, the latter's body twitched violently in pain. In an instant, Hu Yinyang didn't dare to touch him again. Master, she looked at Luo Qingtong with tears in her eyes. The latter's gaze swept over Chu Lingfeng. Chapter 15-20. Chu Lingfeng's flesh, blood, and bones were all torn apart by the vines that pierced into his body. If it weren't for Feng Wan deliberately avoiding Chu Lingfeng's vital organs in order to torture him better, he would have struggled to die in incomparable pain. She feared that Chu Lingfeng would have long since stopped breathing. Even so, Chu Lingfeng's injuries were so serious that he was on the verge of death. Even with his powerful regenerative abilities, he was still tormented to this point by Feng Wan. It could be seen just how heavy the latter's attacks were. In an instant, Luo Qingtong's eyes burst out with killing intent. Feng Wan, you're courting death. Luo Qingtong fiercely slapped Snowball beneath her. The latter understood and instantly jumped up, attacking Feng Wan who was standing on top of a blood-red demonic vine. Humph. Evil Dr. Ghost Eye, I didn't think you would still be alive. Feng Wan's eyes were cold. After being exposed by Luo Qingtong, she no longer concealed her identity as Luo Qingtong. She actually knew her identity. Then, during the Sage Monarch's Tomb Convention, she already knew that she was deliberately targeting her. No wonder she was so unforgiving and insisted on apologizing in front of everyone. Her pride and arrogance had been completely trampled to the bottom of the mud. It turned out that she already knew her identity. So she guessed that she would target her at the Sage Monarch's Tomb convention, so she deliberately beat her at her own game? As Feng Yuan thought this, she instantly clenched her teeth so hard that they were about to break. Her actions at the Sage Monarch's Tomb convention were the greatest disgrace of her life. She had been noble all her life. Before she met Luo Qingtong, her life had always been smooth sailing. However, Luo Qingtong had suddenly risen, and the name of evil Dr. Ghost I had spread throughout the Sky Spill continent. Her reputation had been surpassed by the other party. Not only that, but the other party had repeatedly thwarted her. The men she fancied only had eyes for each other. Every time she wanted something, her plans would be ruined by the other party. Evil Dr. Gui Tong, I already exist in this world, so why do you still exist? Damn you! Feng Yuan looked at Luo Qingtong with jealousy and hatred. Then, he suddenly sneered and waved his hand. In an instant, the blood-colored vines that had been chopped up by Luo Qingtong once again gathered together and rose up like dragons and pythons. Good! Evil Dr. Ghost Eye. Feng Yuan stood on the blood-colored vine with his head held high. His gaze was cold as he looked in the direction of Luo Qingtong. Since you're not dead, then die in my hands. This Saint King's tomb is the best place for you to be buried. Feng Yuan sneered. Luo Qingtong came at the right time. Previously, he regretted not being able to kill her with his own hands. Unexpectedly, she was lucky enough to escape the Huo clan's patriarch's pursuit. However, this was as far as she went. Under his arrangements, she would die. In this sealed tomb, even if Luo Qingtong died, Yi Qianxian would not know. When he went out, he would have a chance to obtain that man. Luo Qingtong and the people around her should wait to be buried in the ground with the Saint King's tomb forever. With a wave of Feng Yuan's hand, the blood-colored vines that had gathered together suddenly slithered like dragons and snakes. With an extremely fast speed and an extremely powerful killing intent, they rushed towards Luo Qingtong. Looking at the blood-colored vines that were rushing towards her like dragons and pythons, Luo Qingtong's eyes were ice cold. Chapter 15:21. The corners of her lips twitched. She raised her hand and swung her sword. Boom! Following Luo Qingtong's movements, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth in the entire exit hall instantly became violent. In Luo Qingtong's left hand, the power from the Holy King's soul continuously poured into Luo Qingtong's body. Then, through the meridians in her body, it violently poured into the life and death duality sword in her body. In an instant, there was a violent explosion. A beam of majestic sword light swept out in an instant. It seemed to carry the momentum of severing heaven and earth and seizing creation as it violently blasted toward the shrieking blood-colored demonic vines ahead. Bang, bang, bang. The sword light in Luo Qingtong's hand swept out. In an instant, the blood-colored demonic vines were shattered again, just like how they were shattered by Luo Qingtong before. However, this time, they could no longer reunite like before. This was because Luo Qingtong had cut off the most important main meridian in their bodies and left a streak of life blade qi in it, hindering them from continuing to absorb the death qi. Without the support of the death qi, these blood-colored demonic vines withered in an instant. Luo Qingtong's blood eyes immediately discovered the location of their lifeline. Others didn't know how these blood-colored demonic vines grew, but in Luo Qingtong's blood eyes, everything was exposed. Bang, bang, bang. The blood-colored giant vines withered and fell to the ground, and Feng Yuan's figure was also shaken back step by step by the terrible force of the collision between Luo Qingtong's attack and the blood-colored giant vines. If it weren't for the main root of the blood-colored giant vine beneath her reducing most of its power, she would have been shaken off by the terrible force and aura. This is impossible. Feeling the terrible force of Luo Qingtong's slash, Feng Yuan's face instantly distorted. How was this possible? How did the other party's strength increase so much in such a short time? The power of the blood-red vines came from absorbing the death chi and blood essence in the tomb. The power of the vines had already surpassed the saint realm and reached the saint realm or even the sage master realm. Under such circumstances, how could evil Dr. Ghost Eye possibly shatter their attacks, break through their defenses, and destroy them so that they could not reassemble and revive? Feng Yuan felt like he was going crazy. The gap between Luo Qingtong and her wasn't that big in the past. In other words, she used to be the one looking down on Luo Qingtong from above. Even if the other party's medical skills were far superior to hers, and she had the favor of the Blackfields Ming Zun, Feng Yuan still felt that the evil Dr. Ghost Eye was inferior to her. The strength displayed by Luo Qingtong was a huge blow to her. How could the other party's strength suddenly become so strong? What the hell is going on? Feng Yuan couldn't believe it at all. When Luo Qingtong first appeared, she thought that the other party was lucky to escape from the Huo family head's pursuit. As for the fact that Luo Qingtong cut her vines, she thought that she used some special method. For this reason, she specially strengthened her control of the blood-red vines. However, Feng Yuan didn't expect that Luo Qingtong relied entirely on her own strength. How could she be so strong? How could she be so strong? Feng Yuan's heart was full of disbelief. At this moment, boom. Chapter 1522. Then, with a bang sound, in front of Feng Yuan, at the place where Yu Si Wang's figure disappeared, a huge ball of wriggling vines suddenly exploded. The branches and tendrils scattered about chaotically like rain. Like a giant dragon python, the huge blood-colored vines burst out and flew to the sky. At the same time, a crimson figure suddenly shot out from the web of blood-colored vines in the sky. With a shwa sound, Yu Si Wang's figure flew quickly and landed in front of Luo Qingtong, Su Yu, and the others. Tong! Little Joe, Seeing Luo Qingtong's figure, Yu Si Wang's eyes suddenly lit up. That pair of bewitching eyes swept past Luo Qingtong, and then he suddenly smiled. I knew you would be fine, Yu Si Wang said, and raised his hand to touch the tear mole under his eye. His face was indescribably evil and lazy, as if he had never worried about Luo Qingtong's safety. He had always been so wise. However, that moment of relaxation and relief in his eyes did not escape Luo Qingtong's eyes. She looked at him and smiled slightly. Thank you. This time, if Yu Si Wang was not here, the consequences would be unimaginable. Not to mention other things, if Yu Si Wang was not here, with the strength of these vines, even without the cooperation of the Ouyang family, Feng Yuan could easily kill and tear Su Yu and the others to shreds. Not to mention that the other side also had a group of family forces. If it was not for Yu Si Wang and the people of the southern mountain range, Su Yu, Tian Xie's people, and family whose people, they would all be dead before she arrived. Luo Qingtong sincerely thanked Yu Si Wang. Although she had saved his life before, but along the way, Yu Si Wang had almost completely repaid the favor of saving his life. This time, it was her turn to owe him a favor. It's useless to say thanks. Yu Si Wang's charming eyes looked at Luo Qingtong. Suddenly he smiled and said with an evil charm, use action to show that I welcome you. As he spoke, he raised his hand to cover the wound under his red robe, and put his hand behind his back. Yu Si Wang had just attracted all of Feng Yuan's vines. Those vines weren't as new as the ones that Feng Yuan summoned later on. The vines that Yu Si Wang faced had already absorbed a lot of death chi and blood essence, and had grown very strong. The vines were all attracted to him. Only then did family Hu and the people of the southern region have a chance to catch their breath. Otherwise, Su Yu and the rest of the people from the Ouyang clan and the other clans and forces who had turned against them at the last minute, in addition to the vines, would have killed them all in one move. However, because all the vines were attracted to him, Yu Si Wang was unavoidably injured. In the end, he was only one person, and these vines had absorbed the death qi and blood essence of the Saint King's tomb. The more they fought, the stronger they became. This was their home ground. Even if Yu Si Huang's strength was rare, he still suffered a little under their hands. However, he didn't want Luo Qingtong to know about this. What was there to say when he was injured? Win sympathy. If it was before, Yu Si Huang would definitely do this. If he could win a little sympathy, then he would win a little sympathy. What if Luo Qingtong was soft-hearted and really let him take advantage of her? But now, he wasn't willing. The most important thing was, if it was Yi Qianxian, that guy would definitely not be injured. This was troublesome. How could Yu Si Huang let Luo Qingtong know that he was inferior to Yi Qianxian? Even if it was the truth, he still couldn't. The feeling of losing to a love rival was not good at all. Yu Si Huang snorted coldly, and hid the wound on his hand tightly. Chapter 1523. Around Feng Wuan's body, blood-colored vines that looked like giant pythons swam around him. The body and color of these vines were far larger and deeper than the ones that Luo Qingtong and Yu Si Huang had killed. Not only that, but the aura that they exuded was constantly increasing. The vast power that they exuded was becoming more and more powerful. In the battle just now, Luo Qingtong and the others, as well as the Ouyang family and other family forces, had suffered many casualties. The death aura and blood essence of these people were all absorbed by these blood-colored giant vines. This allowed them to grow stronger and stronger. This was the terrifying aspect of these blood-colored giant vines in this Saint King's tomb. It was also the reason why Feng Wuan would rather take out the map of the Saint King's tomb to the Ouyang family and set up an ambush here. It was better to set up an ambush here than anywhere else. A completely enclosed space, enough people, and the sage monarch's tomb had the advantage of being in the right place. In short, this was the place where these blood-colored giant vines grew the fastest. After a while, several vines broke through again and promoted to the level of Saint Master. The aura that they exuded was even more horrifying. And at the place where Feng Yuan was standing, a small flower bud suddenly appeared. It was a blood-colored flower bud. Inside the flower bud, there seemed to be a heart that was moving up and down. Streaks of blood-colored aura were injected into the small blood-colored flower bud. This blood-colored flower bud was the Saint Realm flower that Feng Wuan wanted to obtain. It was formed by gathering the blood essence and power of a group of martial artists. Once it bloomed and was taken, below the Saint Realm, one would immediately break through to the Saint Realm. And above the Saint Realm, one would immediately break through to beyond the Saint Realm. This blood-colored flower was extremely rare and was not something that could be found in the Sky Spill continent. It was also extremely precious and rare in the outer realms. The green smoke also obtained a blood phantom vine by chance. Before, he was reluctant to take it out for Feng Wuan to use. If it weren't for Luo Qingtong breaking Feng Wuan's luck-seizing technique, causing a large amount of Feng Wuan's strength to be absorbed by Ma Chenyi, it would be difficult for him to break through in the future, and his talent and strength would also be greatly damaged. He would never let Feng Wuan use it. Now, the blood phantom vine had absorbed a large amount of death energy and blood essence, and had begun to bloom. At the same time, the power of the vines around it grew stronger and stronger. After all, the blood-colored flower needed blood essence and death energy to nourish it. The bigger it was, the more powerful the vines around it were absorbing. Seeing the blood-red flower bud appear, Feng Wuan's face lit up with joy. Then, he looked at Luo Qingtong and the others with a sneer on his face. Evil Dr. Ghost Eye, I admit that your luck has always been very good. Your strength has suddenly increased so much. I'm afraid that you have obtained a great opportunity in this Saint King's tomb, right? Speaking of this, the jealousy in Feng Wuan's eyes seemed to be about to be quenched with poison. All of these things should have been hers. If it weren't for Luo Qingtong interfering and scheming against her. The opportunities in this Saint King's tomb might not have been hers. And, what did she do? Why could she obtain the favor of Yi Qianxian and Yu Si Huang at the same time? She was also a doctor, and her medical skills were not inferior to evil Dr. Ghost Eye. Chapter 1524. Even Yu Si Huang, the king of the southern region, was by her side, running around and protecting her in every possible way. Knowing that the consequence of refusing her request may be death, but she was not even willing to show any signs of submission. What's more, she didn't even hesitate, she didn't even have the thought of betraying Luo Qingtong. Why was the other party so lucky? Feng Yuan pinched her palm fiercely, looking at Luo Qingtong with resentment in her eyes. She looked at Luo Qingtong coldly, then sneered and said, "But even if you have great luck, so what? In this Saint King's tomb, I am the real ruler and king. So what if Luo Qingtong could cut the previous vines? That was just a new batch of vines that she had spawned. It was completely different from the main blood demon vines that were now surrounding her. Not only that, in this Saint King's tomb, as long as there was enough death energy and blood essence, she could continue to improve the strength of these main blood demon vines. What could Luo Qingtong use to compare with her? Her opportunity to improve was limited. But these blood demon vines in her hands were completely different. Feng Yuan thought so, and her confidence increased in an instant. She looked at Luo Qingtong, and the sneer on her lips was even more obvious. So what if the other party had a great opportunity, and how fast her strength improved? She still had to die here. And she would never let her die so easily. Evil Dr. Gui Tong, take this. As Feng Yuan's voice sounded, the blood-colored giant vines that were constantly surrounding her instantly attacked Luo Qingtong and Yu Si Huang like dragons. Except for the two of them, the others were not in Feng Yuan's eyes. As long as except for Luo Qingtong and Yu Si Huang, the rest of the people would die sooner or later. Feng Yuan's eyes were cold, and at the same time, she ordered the Ouyang family and other family forces to follow suit. She must let Luo Qingtong and Yu Si Huang die without a burial place. Feng Yuan set aside a group of people to deal with Su Yu and the others, lest these people were eager to protect their master and ruin her plan to kill evil Dr. Gui Tong. This person had many schemes and thoughts, who knew what she would think of to escape. After a series of face slaps, Feng Yuan no longer dared to have any thoughts of underestimating Luo Qingtong. She surrounded Su Yu and the others to prevent them from coming to make trouble and create an opportunity for Luo Qingtong to escape. At the same time, it was to prevent Luo Qingtong's life. She had no way to escape. These people had risked their lives for her, disregarding their own lives. She didn't believe that Luo Qingtong would be able to leave these people to escape. If that was really the case, the other party wouldn't be the evil Dr. Gui Tong who was known as protective. Feng Yuan's eyes were dark and ruthless. As for the Ouyang family head and those powerhouses, when she called out Luo Qingtong's name, they were already looking at Luo Qingtong in horror. This Yi Jiu was actually the evil Dr. Gui Tong. That Blackfield's genius alchemist, Ming Zun's lover. They looked at Luo Qingtong in horror. As for the latter, when Feng Yuan called out her identity, she didn't hide it anymore. Her aura and elegance were on full display. Chapter 1525. She clearly had a delicate and frail body, but under her imposing aura, she exuded a completely different demonic and domineering aura. The smile on her lips was as cold as ice. She was dressed in black and stood in the air with Yu Si Huang. She wasn't inferior in the slightest. Looking at Luo Qingtong, no one had any more questions. With such a magnificent and imposing aura, as well as being so outstanding and young, besides the rumored dark revered of the Blackfield, evil Dr. Ghost Eye, who else could it be? No wonder they couldn't find out Yi Jiu's identity and origin. It turned out that the other party's identity was so terrifying. Evil Dr. Ghost-eyed, the person that Dark revered of the black field held in the palm of his hand. Everyone's complexion changed as they looked at Luo Qingtong with unspeakable horror. The other party was actually evil Dr. Ghost-eye. This enmity was too great. No matter what, they couldn't let the other party leave the Saint King's tomb alive. Otherwise, all of them who had participated in the killing of Luo Qingtong would die. Dark revered of the black field would never let them go. As everyone thought this, they instantly quivered and no longer dared to hesitate. They immediately split into two groups and surrounded Luo Qingtong, Su Yu, and the others. Su Yu and the others were only restraining them. As for Luo Qingtong and Yu Huang, they were completely killing them. Among them, the Ouyang family was the most active. They had already made a big mistake. Even if they made another mistake, they would continue walking down this path. As they rushed towards Luo Qingtong and Yu Huang, those blood-red vines had already dragged their huge bodies through the air. They were like dragons and pythons as they rushed towards Luo Qingtong and Yu Huang. Tong Tong, be careful. These vines are very strong. Moreover, they can come back from the dead. Yu Huang's eyes were cold. Luo Qingtong's identity had already been exposed by Feng Wan. He didn't need to hide it anymore. It was just that these vines were really troublesome. Their strength continued to rise, and they were extremely powerful. Moreover, they could even come back from the dead. This point gave Yu Huang the biggest headache. When he was trapped in the ball of vines, it was because of this that he was injured. And with Luo Qingtong's strength, he didn't know if she could handle it. Yu Huang also discovered that Luo Qingtong's strength had increased. The girl was resourceful and had many tricks up her sleeves. She might have a way to deal with these vines. However, Yu Huang did not have much hope. After all, in front of absolute strength, ordinary methods would not have much effect. Forget it. Back then, she had saved his life. This time, he would repay her with his life. Who asked him to like her and know her? Yu Huang thought, his heart was already prepared. If there was nothing he could do, then even if he had to risk his life, he would tear apart the space here and send Luo Qingtong out. The man's pair of bewitching eyes were full of seriousness. He unconsciously blocked in front of Luo Qingtong. Looking at his figure blocking in front of her, Luo Qingtong's lips slightly hooked up. Alright, your hand is injured, don't try to show off. Did he really think that she couldn't see? Luo Qingtong glanced at Yu Huang. She raised her hand and pulled him behind her. After that, she raised her eyes to look at the blood-red vines and the people from the Ouyang family. Her eyes narrowed slightly, and she raised her hand and waved it. Chapter 1526. Along with Luo Qingtong's voice, a small pink figure leaped onto her shoulder. Ha! It's finally my turn to show off my invincible might. Little Pig stood on Luo Qingtong's shoulder with a smug look on his face as he jumped up and down with his 4 little hooves. During this period of time, he had been sullen to death. As Luo Qingtong's natal contracted beast, he couldn't even help her when she was in danger several times. This was simply a disgrace to his reputation as the ancient divine pig. But now, it was finally able to show off its skills. Humph! How dare a puny demonic plant show off in front of your grandpa pig? If it weren't for the fact that I was sealed, would have blown all of you to death with a single breath. Little Pig snorted coldly as he looked at the ferocious blood-colored vines that resembled giant pythons rushing toward him. Then, he dashed toward the blood-colored vines. Boom! As he dashed toward the vines, an incomparably dazzling light suddenly burst out from his body. In an instant, his body was enveloped by the light. The ball of light floated in midair. At the same time, a deep purple hexagram suddenly appeared on Luo Qingtong's forehead. Buzz! As soon as the 6-pointed star pattern appeared, it began to spin rapidly. In the air, there seemed to be the sound of thunder and dragon roars. In the blink of an eye, it was as if a phoenix was crying. Then, it was as if an auspicious bird was crying and a giant beast was roaring. The voices echoed faintly in the air. It was as if thousands of demonic beasts were roaring at the same time from all directions, from the endless void of time and space, from the primordial times. The exit of the main hall shook violently. Countless amounts of spiritual chi of heaven and earth surged around the crowd like boiling water, rioting and surging. It was as if they were trembling because of the imminent arrival of a terrifying aura and existence. Amidst the boiling spiritual energy, the ball of light around Little Pig suddenly exploded. Countless rays of light shot out and almost covered the entire main hall at the exit. Then, in the midst of this incomparably dazzling light, a shrill roar that seemed to have transcended the primordial times rang out. An incomparably huge claw suddenly stretched out from the ball of light. The tip of the claw lightly hooked. With a boom, the blood-colored vines that were darting around like dragons and snakes, emitting a terrifying aura like primordial beasts, were torn to shreds by the gentle movement of the claw. The terrifying power that seemed to have come from the primordial times and the boundless lands caused those vines to squirm on the ground after being torn into pieces. They were unable to gather back together for a long time. At the instant Little Pig made his move, a group of figures stopped not far away from the entrance of Wildland City. "What's going on?" The young man in the lead suddenly raised his head and looked in the direction of the Saint King's tomb. Was it his imagination? Why did he feel as if he had sensed an extremely terrifying force that could tear this entire continent into pieces in an instant? The young man was horrified. At this moment, several voices came from behind him. Chapter 15:27. Behind the young man was a group of young men and women who wore the same clothes as him. They should be from the same sect. It's nothing. Let's continue. The young man regained his composure and shook his head with a frown. He must have sensed wrongly. How could there be such a terrifying power here? It had to be known that even the legendary Venerable Realm powerhouses might not be able to tear apart a continent. This was the mortal land of the Sky Spill continent. Compared to the hidden world, the difference in strength was like the difference between heaven and earth. How could such a power appear here? With that thought in mind, he stopped thinking about it and continued to lead the people behind him in the direction of Wild City. Saint Monarch's tomb. They watched as the giant claw that seemed to have descended from the heavens smashed all the blood-colored vines that were rushing towards them into smithereens. Everyone, including Hu Yennyang and the others, were shocked. They looked at the little pig that had returned to its pig form and fell into Luo Qingtong's arms. They never thought that it would be so powerful. Hu Yennyang and the others had never seen the little pig fight before. They thought that it was only a small pet raised by Luo Qingtong. They were just worried that Luo Qingtong would call it out. They never thought that it would be so powerful. Those blood-red vines that emitted a terrifying aura were like giant pythons and dragons. Under its claws, they were like weeds, not even worth mentioning. Yu Huang also looked at this scene with surprise. Then, he suddenly chuckled. This woman had saved him once again. It seemed that he owed her for the rest of his life. While Hu Yennyang and the others were surprised and happy in their hearts, Feng Yuan's side was shocked beyond words and was on the verge of collapse. How is this possible? Feng Yuan looked at the blood-red vines that were as thick as dragons bursting apart in front of her. He couldn't believe his eyes. She came here full of killing intent and confidence. She thought that she would be able to kill Luo Qingtong and Yu Huang, but she didn't expect that she would be ruthlessly slapped in the face. He watched as the vines exploded in front of him, breaking apart and scattering like rain. The proud and cold smile on Feng Yuan's face immediately froze. Even the curvature of his lips seemed to have been frozen in place. This is impossible. She screamed shrilly. At this moment, Luo Qingtong's figure flashed. Feng Wan, I'll return all the words you said just now to you. Don't even think about leaving this tomb. As Luo Qingtong's voice rang out, the girl raised her long sword with a boom. In the blink of an eye, his entire body was like a black bolt of lightning, piercing through the air above the exit hall, violently rushing towards Feng Wan. It was time for the latter to pay the price for what she had just done. Luo Qingtong would never allow the opponent to attack without retaliating. Boom! The girl's figure flew. In an instant, she was like a swimming dragon, moving like a rabbit as she violently attacked Feng Wan. The latter was standing on the thickest main vine. After the attack just now, only this main vine was left in good condition in the exit hall. The other blood-red demonic vines were all shattered by Little Pig's slap. Chapter 1528. She didn't have time to be entangled and resentful of her failure just now. She raised her hand and tried to summon those broken blood-colored vines again. However, those blood-colored vines wriggled for a long time, but they couldn't fuse at all. Not for anything else, but at their wounds, there was an extremely powerful and overbearing power that seemed to be derived from ancient times, covering them. It made the death aura in those vines unable to spread at all. This was the power left behind by Little Pig's attack. His true body was incomparably powerful. Even if it was sealed and could only use a little power, the essence of this power would not change. Under such circumstances, the death aura in these vines had no way to break through the blockade of those forces. Naturally, there was no way to resurrect. Boom boom boom. With no other choice, Feng Wan could only give up on gathering those powerful blood-colored demonic vines and summon new blood-colored demonic vines. But in the attack just now, she only let the people of the Ouyang family and those forces restrain Su Yu and the others. There were no casualties at all. The summoned vines were only 2 or 3, and they were cut off by Luo Qingtong in an instant. The life and death yin-yang sword in the latter's hand was the nemesis of those vines' death aura. When Luo Qingtong slashed with her sword, those vines had no chance to resurrect at all and withered in an instant. In just a moment, Luo Qingtong arrived in front of Feng Wan. She waved the long sword in her hand and slashed at Feng Wan. Her attack was ruthless and indomitable. Obviously, she wasn't going to give Feng Wan any chance to survive and escape. Luo Qingtong never liked to leave any future troubles. Boom! As Luo Qingtong slashed with her sword, the green smoke in Feng Wan's body was alarmed. It had just taken control of Feng Wan's body and had already consumed a lot of power. It was now sleeping and recuperating. However, he did not expect to be alarmed by Feng Wan's crisis. When the eye of the erase saw Luo Qingtong's sword slashing down, its consciousness suddenly froze. Then, with a boom, it rushed up and took control of Feng Wan's body in an instant. With a bang, he raised his hand and blocked Luo Qingtong's attack with his own strength. Surprisingly, Yang Kai found that the other party's attack contained the aura of a Saint King. Immediately, the green smoke's expression froze. Go! The Saint King realm aura in Luo Qingtong's body was extremely powerful, and although she couldn't fully exert it, he had consumed too much of his strength before and couldn't fully resist it. If this continued, Feng Wan would definitely die. With that thought in mind, he immediately controlled Feng Wan's body to leave. Seeing that Feng Wan was about to leave, Luo Qingtong narrowed her eyes fiercely. She clenched the heart of the 1,000-year soul guiding wood in her hand and prepared her strongest attack. Feng Wan, this disaster, couldn't be easily let go. However, just as the green smoke controlled Feng Wan's body to leave, the consciousness of Feng Wan, who had already recovered, suddenly went crazy. No! I won't go. Feng Wan's heart was filled with extreme hatred. She glared at Luo Qingtong in front of her with a ruthless gaze. The young man held a sword in front of her. Black clothes and black hair, he was unbridled and charming and domineering. Feng Yuan looked at Luo Qingtong like this, and her eyes were about to be quenched with poison. Chapter 1529. In order to return with glory and regain what she had before, she had planned and schemed for so long, all for today. How could she leave? After she left, was she going to hand over all the fruits of her hard work to evil Dr. Ghost Eye? No. As Feng Yuan's voice sounded, the wisp of green smoke scolded her in her mind. Shut up. Where there's life, there's hope. You're no match for her now. You must avoid her. Qingyan's words were meant to persuade Feng Yuan. Luo Qingtong obviously had a special encounter in the Saint King's tomb. It was unwise for Feng Yuan to confront her head-on. It was better to leave first and think of a way later. However, his words poked at Feng Yuan's most sensitive point. She had always been superior and did not think that Luo Qingtong could compare to her. She could find many excuses for herself when she lost to Luo Qingtong in the past. But this time, Qingyan said that she was inferior to Luo Qingtong. All the pent-up anger and resentment in her heart exploded. No. I'll never leave. I still have one last trump card. As Feng Yuan spoke, there was a boom. Her intense resentment and obsession actually allowed her consciousness to suppress the green smoke and snatch back control of her body from the other party's hands. Evil Dr. Gui Tong, I won't lose to you. Never. As Feng Yuan roared in her heart, her voice was incomparably cold and contained a deep killing intent that resounded in the hall. Explode. As Feng Yuan's voice sounded, in an instant, in the direction of the Ouyang clan, including the Ouyang clan master and the other experts of the Ouyang clan, in an instant, boom. 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 A series of violent explosions rang out. In an instant, the entire exit hall was filled with an extremely strong smell of blood. Before the Ouyang family head and all the other members of the Ouyang family could react, their bodies began to swell violently. In an instant, they were like balloons that had been blown over their heads. They exploded with a boom. The Ouyang clan master and the other experts were more powerful and could withstand the explosion for a longer time. His eyes bulged as he looked in the direction of Feng Yuan. His eyes were full of resentment. You. Bitch. You. He pointed at Feng Yuan with a trembling finger. Naturally, he knew that such an incident in his clan was related to the latter. It was like asking a tiger for its skin. The Ouyang clan master's eyes were full of regret. If he had known that Feng Yuan was so ruthless, he would have done something to the people in his family. He would never have agreed to cooperate with the other party. So much so that he was tricked by the other party. The Ouyang family head's eyes were filled with hatred and resentment, but Feng Yuan's eyes were cold. Who asked the people of the Ouyang family to be so stupid? Without any means, how could she cooperate with them? Naturally, she had to ensure that she could control them. Originally, Feng Yuan had decided to use the form of cooperation to let the Ouyang clan arrange things for her. Once the dust had settled, she would use her own tricks to threaten the Ouyang family to pledge their allegiance to her. In this way, everything that the Ouyang clan obtained would belong to her. She would also become the true ruler of the far west wilderness. But all of this was ruined by the evil Dr. Gui Tong. Evil Dr. Gui Tong, you deserve to die. Feng Yuan looked in the direction of Luo Qingtong with resentment and shook her hand fiercely. Chapter 1530. As Feng Yuan's voice sounded, in an instant, the whole ground trembled violently. Under Feng Yuan's voice, the main vine standing under Feng Yuan's feet rose up in an instant like a dragon coming out of its cave. Amidst the violent tremors, which seemed to be capable of collapsing the entire exit hall, the aura of the incomparably huge main vine continued to soar. The originally incomparably thick body, at this moment, expanded horizontally countless times again. It rose from the ground fiercely, almost breaking through the dome of the exit hole. The long body rolled up and down in the space of this exit hall, crawling like a wild behemoth. Countless blood chi and death chi all rushed towards it at this moment. In the exit hall, the people of the family forces had long been stunned by this sudden scene. They never thought that Feng Yuan would suddenly attack the people of the Ouyang family. Isn't the other party a member of the Ouyang family? Just as everyone was thinking about this, they suddenly saw a group of figures pouncing towards them. It was none other than the remnants of the blood demon vines that were constantly creeping on the ground after being crushed by Little Pig's paw, but there was no way to reunite. At this moment, these remnants of the vines were all twisting their bodies, rushing towards them like snake shadows. The nearest group of people was caught off guard and was hit by the remnants of the blood demon vines. In an instant, screams rang out one after another. The voices of the people of the family forces were miserable, and the blood chi and power of their bodies were constantly absorbed by the remnants of the vines that rushed up. Streams of blood energy and death energy spread out along with their screams. In just an instant, the people of the family forces were sucked into dry corpses. At the same time, the remains of the vines also withered in an instant. The power of the blood essence that was released from their bodies was instantly absorbed by the main vine. The power aura around the latter became more and more terrifying. Looking at this scene, the faces of all the people from the various families and forces changed. It turned out that Feng Yuan's target was not only the people of the Ouyang family, but also all of them. The latter couldn't wait to kill all of them present to provide nourishment for the huge main vine's growth. Everyone thought so, and suddenly there was an indescribable panic and fear in their hearts. The scene was filled with screams, and it was extremely chaotic. Su Yu and the others were also attacked by these vines, but everyone from the heavenly diabolism held a spirit chi gun in their hands. Under the precise control and aim, the broken branches and vines that rushed over were all knocked down under the attack of Su Yu and the others. Although they couldn't destroy them, the vines couldn't get close to them. Family Hu and the people of the southern mountain range were protected in the middle and were unharmed. Seeing this scene, the people from the various families felt a wave of regret in their hearts. If they knew the end result would be like this, they would never have turned against Su Yu and the others under Feng Yuan's threat. Now, the path of survival that they thought they had found was actually a path to death. On the contrary, Family Hu and the people of the southern mountain range were living well. Chapter 1531. And on the other side, Feng Yuan stepped on the main vine that was like an ancient and savage dragon, rushing towards Luo Qingtong. This time, she would definitely kill her opponent. Tong tong. Seeing this scene, Yu Si Wang's eyes instantly shrunk. At the same time, rumble rumble rumble. Outer space. In a remote and desolate continent that was an unknown distance away from the Sky Spill continent, countless bolts of lightning flashed and thunder roared. They were like blood-red saber lights that fiercely cleaved through the skies of this desolate continent. At the very center of the continent, a silver figure was faintly discernible as it floated amidst a storm of lightning and thunder. Pang pang pang. Terrifying bolts of lightning came crashing down from the sky like a torrential downpour. It was like the Milky Way was falling from the heavens, shattering the vast skies. And not too far away from this continent, Bei Qing and Feather Wind were anxiously looking at this desolate continent. This storm of lightning has already continued for a full 7 days and 7 nights. Damn it! Does the heavenly Tao want Master to die so badly? Bei Qing gripped her fists, looking at the most concentrated point of the desolate continent in front of her. That was where Yi Qianxian was. After the two of them brought Yi Qianxian here in the form of a young fox, they were able to withstand the barrage of thunder and lightning at the start. But towards the end, they were completely unable to do so and were forced out. At this time, Yi Qianxian was the only one resisting the endless barrage of thunder. This level of lightning attack, if it wasn't Yi Qianren who was inside, but any other expert in this star field, they would have been blasted to pieces by this incomparably dense thunder and lightning. The two of them were filled with worry. The heavenly Tao clearly didn't want their master to succeed in extending his life. The further the thunder and lightning went, the fiercer the attack became. A casual attack like this was enough to pierce through a low-level continent like the Sky Spill continent. Luckily, they had brought their master away from the Sky Spill continent in time. Otherwise, if their master couldn't display his strength, there would be no way for him to resist this barrage of thunder and lightning. As the two of them were thinking this, there was a sudden hum. The barrage of thunder and lightning in front of them suddenly stopped. Did it work? The two of them were pleasantly surprised. However, before they could smile, in that instant, bang! An extremely terrifying aura filled the air. They looked at the dense barrage of thunder and lightning in front of them and opened a path. Immediately thereafter, an extremely thick pillar of purplish-black lightning came crashing down from the heavens, threatening to encompass the entirety of the abandoned continent up ahead. At the very center of this pillar of thunder, a flickering white dot flashed. An incomparably frightening aura that seemed capable of destroying the entire region was emitted from it. World-extinguishing God thunder. Seeing this incomparably powerful and terrifying pillar of thunder come crashing down, Beiqing and Windfeather felt their hearts tighten. Master! Just as the two of them cried out in alarm, with a loud bang, countless bolts of thunder and lightning wrapped around a single point. A ball of silver light suddenly burst open. Chapter 1532. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Yi Qianqian's eyes were ice cold as he looked at the heavenly punishment that came crashing down from the heavens. There wasn't the slightest ripple of emotion on his handsome face. He lifted his hand and blasted out an attack. Heaven-conquering art, annihilation. As the man's cold voice resounded through the skies, a blood-red light flashed from the man's sleeves. With a bang, an incomparably stunning saber light shot out from the man's fluttering silver sleeves. In an instant, it cut through the wilderness and extinguished all light. Pang! That terrifying pillar of lightning that could almost turn the abandoned continent beneath Yi Qianxian into dust was instantly annihilated by Yi Qianxian's move. The entire world seemed to wail and tremble under this attack. The incomparably thick pillar of lightning shattered with a loud bang. In the endless void, there seemed to be something that was hatefully flying away. Yi Qianqian's figure stood between the heavens and earth. His eyes seemed to contain countless saber lights and blood swords. He coldly stared at the void, as if he wanted to peer into the depths of the endless void. Master! Beiqing and Feng Yu rushed to Yi Qianqian's side, their faces filled with joy and surprise. Master, did you succeed in extending your life? Yi Qianxian withdrew his gaze. He stood in the starry sky with his hands clasped behind his back, sensing the situation within his body. He had indeed succeeded in extending his life. The strength of his meridians had increased by a great deal. It was enough for him to support himself for another 3 years. Unfortunately, even if he had absorbed all the power of the heavenly fox's blood essence, it was only enough for him to send out an attack that was comparable to his peak state. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for him to just shatter the world-extinguishing thunder. Yi Qianqian's eyes were cold. He flicked his sleeves and said, "Let's go." He had left the Sky Spill continent for so long. It was time to return. I wonder how that woman is doing in the far west wilderness. Thinking of the enemies Luo Qingtong had provoked in the far west wilderness, Yi Qianxian slightly frowned. He didn't know why, but he had an uneasy feeling. He hoped that nothing would happen to that woman. As Yi Qianxian and the others disappeared, the surrounding heaven and earth spirit qi began to calm down. At this moment, a group of figures suddenly rushed in from the front. I clearly sensed an extremely powerful and terrifying aura here just now. How come it's gone now? The strength of this group of people was extremely powerful. With their arrival, the surrounding heaven and earth spirit chi started to boil again. One of them, a middle-aged man who looked to be about 40 years old, glanced at the scene in front of him. He immediately frowned and asked doubtfully. Maybe I sensed wrongly. Someone beside him said. Impossible. The middle-aged man said, it's fine if I was the only one who sensed it wrong, but you guys sensed it too. This was definitely the first time a group of people had sensed wrongly. The middle-aged man's expression was grave. At this moment, a voice sounded out from behind him. Whether or not we sense wrongly, we'll know once we take a look. As he spoke, a young girl wearing a jade green robe walked out from behind him. Her beautiful eyes swept over the scene in front of her. The young girl looked to be about 17 or 18 years old. Her eyebrows were thin, and her lips were pink. Her figure was slender and elegant, and her face carried a bit of beauty and nobility. As she walked out from behind, the group of people quickly bowed. The blood energy and death energy it absorbed were too powerful. It wasn't just the blood energy and death energy of the Ouyang family, but also the power of the wriggling bloody remains. The strength of the main vine of the blood-colored demonic vine had been raised to an extremely terrifying level. Under such circumstances, even if Luo Qingtong absorbed the power of the Saint King's soul in the heart of the thousand-year soul guiding tree, it wouldn't pose any hindrance. Chapter 1534. Luo Qingtong looked at this scene and slightly narrowed her eyes. At this moment, Yusi Wang's figure appeared beside her. Let's go, Tong Tong, I'll send you out. He stretched out his hand towards Luo Qingtong. Yusi Wang naturally has a life-saving secret method to leave this place. However, that secret method can only be used once in a short period of time and can only send one person out at a time. After sending off Luo Qingtong, Yusi Wang himself has no way to leave. However, he is not prepared to let Luo Qingtong know about this. No need. Looking at Yusi Wang's outstretched hand, Luo Qingtong frowned. Although she doesn't know what the other party wants to do, but if Yusi Wang really has a way to leave this place easily, she is afraid that he would have used it long ago. Dragging it out until now, she is afraid that the consumption of that method is not small, and the damage to Yusi Wang is also very big. Most importantly, if she leaves, what will happen to Su Yu and the others? Will they all die here? She brought them in, so she naturally has to bring them all out. No one can think of snatching them from her hands. Luo Qingtong's eyes were cold. She avoided Yusi Wang's hand and raised her hand to attack several times, attacking the main vine in front of her. Boom boom boom. That main vine was blasted back violently. Feng Wan was so angry that her face turned white. She doesn't believe that Luo Qingtong can continuously attack like this. The opponent's strength must be limited. No matter how heaven-defying the opportunity in this Saint King's tomb is, it is impossible to raise her strength to such a powerful level in such a short period of time. She must have used some tricks. She is waiting to see when she will reveal her true colors. At that time, she will definitely die without a burial place. And Luo Qingtong, after blasting out those few attacks, suddenly leaped and appeared beside Su Yu and the others. Do you want to live? She raised her hand and attacked, shattering the remains of the blood-red vines that were wriggling towards the people from the various families and forces. The latter and the others were desperately resisting the attacks of the vines. When they saw Luo Qingtong's actions and heard her question, they were stunned. Soon, someone realized what was going on. Yes. We want to live. How could these people not want to live? If it wasn't for the fact that they wanted to survive, they wouldn't have been forced by Feng Wan to swear allegiance to the Ouyang family. As a result, the Ouyang clan's people had all died without a complete corpse. These people had become nutrients for the blood-colored vines. They were truly helpless. Seeing that Luo Qingtong seemed to have the intention to save them, the group hurriedly responded. All right. Luo Qingtong narrowed her eyes coldly at them. Swear your loyalty to me, and I will save you. The blood-red light in her eyes flickered violently. If someone could see the depths of Luo Qingtong's eyes at this moment, they would be shocked to discover that the entire exit hall and even the three-dimensional image of the Saint King's tomb was presented in Luo Qingtong's eyes, constantly rotating and evolving. All right. The people from the various families and forces did not hesitate to delay. They had already sold themselves and the others to the Ouyang family once before. So what if they sold themselves and the others to Luo Qingtong again? As for whether the young man was lying to them, they were about to lose their lives. Who would care about that? Moreover, even if the other party was lying to them, it was meaningless. Chapter 1535. It was with this thought in mind that the people from the various families and forces answered quickly. At this time, they were very glad that they had pledged their loyalty to the Ouyang family. Now that the Ouyang family's people were all dead, they could be considered free. Otherwise, if they had sold to Feng Wan, they would have ended up worse than the Ouyang family's people. They would have already become fertilizer. The group of people hurriedly pledged their loyalty. At this time, Yu Sihuang also rushed to Luo Qingtong's side. Tong Tong, Yu Sihuang, do me a favor. Luo Qingtong looked at him, help me block Feng Wan for 300 breaths of time. Only Yu Sihuang alone could possibly block the main vine's attack. Luo Qingtong needed time. 300 breaths. Yu Sihuang looked deeply at Luo Qingtong, then nodded. Okay. He didn't ask anything, nor did he say anything, he simply turned around and left. 300 breaths of time, as long as he didn't die, he wouldn't miss a single breath of time. Looking at Yu Sihuang's figure leaving, Luo Qingtong looked at the group of people who had already pledged their loyalty to Su Yu and the others. Next, you all listen to my orders, boom. Yu Sihuang's figure rushed towards the blood-colored vine that was once again exploding towards this side. On top of the vine, Feng Wan looked at the situation where Luo Qingtong turned around and returned to Su Yu and the others. Inexplicably, he had a bad premonition in his heart. Although he felt that Luo Qingtong was bound to be doomed this time. After all, this vine had been stimulated to the extreme by her. Unless the Saint King powerhouse in this Saint King's tomb came back from the dead, no one here would be its opponent. Under such circumstances, Luo Qingtong and the others were bound to die. But Feng Wan had suffered too much in the hands of Luo Qingtong before. He didn't dare to lower his guard against the other party. Therefore, even if he didn't think that Luo Qingtong had any chance to turn the tables, after seeing Luo Qingtong's strange actions, he still rushed over regardless of everything. Get lost. Seeing Yu Sihuang rushing towards him, Feng Wan's eyes flashed fiercely. He directly controlled the blood-colored vine under his feet and fiercely whipped towards Yu Sihuang's direction. Boom! That tyrannical and terrifying power directly shook the space in midair, creating ripples that were several feet wide. Especially the surrounding spiritual qi, it was like a huge wave that violently surged up layer by layer. Then, along with the huge body of the blood-colored vine, it violently attacked towards Yu Sihuang. Looking at the violent power rushing towards him, Yu Sihuang's face turned gloomy. 300 breaths of time. He abruptly raised his hand, and in an instant, a few golden needles with a cold gleam appeared between his 5 fingers. He pierced them into the Baihui acupoint on the top of his head. Golden Needle Empowerment. Chapter 1536. Beneath their feet, there were winding lines. Luo Qingtong's figure shuttled between the crowd. A huge inscription pattern that almost enveloped everyone slowly took shape. Wang. As the inscription pattern became more and more perfect, the heaven and earth spiritual qi in the air seemed to have sensed something and faintly began to boil and jump. Feeling this movement, Feng Yuan, who was entangled with Yu Siwang, suddenly raised his head and looked towards Luo Qingtong's direction. His eyes instantly congealed. Damn it! That evil Dr. Gui Tong really had some tricks up his sleeve. Looking at the huge inscription pattern on the ground, Feng Yuan fiercely clenched his teeth and no longer cared about anything else. Explode! She let out a stern shout. In an instant, Yu Siwang felt that the aura of the main vine in front of him was not right. In the next second, a violent explosion sound rang out. It was Feng Yuan who detonated a part of the main vine's body. The tyrannical and terrifying power that escaped from the main vine caught Yu Siwang off guard. Boom, boom, boom. Yu Siwang's figure was sent flying. At the same time, Feng Yuan also controlled the huge main vine and quickly flew towards Luo Qingtong and the others. Evil Dr. Gui Tong, I want you to die. At this moment, Luo Qingtong was only a few lines away from completing the huge inscription pattern. Seeing Feng Yuan's figure flying over, Luo Qingtong's brows slightly wrinkled. At this moment, there was a loud boom. An attack suddenly flew out from behind and exploded on the main vine. The impact caused the main vine's figure to suddenly stop in mid-air for a moment. Cough, cough. 300 breaths of time, is it enough? Behind the main vine, Yu Siwang's figure was barely supporting himself to stand there. The explosion just now had injured him quite badly. At this moment, he was covering his mouth with one hand. Blood was dripping from the gaps between his fingers. His devilishly charming face paled, making his crimson robe seem even redder than blood. Enough. Looking at Yu Siwang's current appearance, Luo Qingtong's complexion became heavy to the extreme. She drew the last line and raised her hand to summon the life and death yin-yang sword. Then, she thrust it down. Spirit summoning array, rise. Following Luo Qingtong's shout, the entire inscription pattern lit up. Luo Qingtong's voice was cold. Infuse power. As her voice rang out, the people that she had arranged to stand on the nodes of the inscription patterns immediately moved in a hurry. They poured the power that they had already prepared into the line that they were standing on. As the power poured in, the entire inscription pattern started to spin. His speed was getting faster and faster. Boom, boom, boom. As the inscription pattern started to spin, the entire Saint King's tomb started to tremble. The trembling became more and more intense. Then, with a loud boom, an extremely powerful consciousness suddenly appeared on the huge inscription pattern. The spirit of the Saint King's tomb. Looking at the appearance of the huge spirit of the Saint King's tomb, everyone's eyes widened in an instant. Chapter 1537. At this time, Feng Yuan controlled the huge main vine to rush in front of Luo Qingtong and the others. However, the moment when it was blocked by Yu Siwang, Luo Qingtong had already completed the inscription lines. Now that she rushed over, what greeted her was the huge spirit of the Holy King's tomb. Under the summoning of Luo Qingtong's spirit summoning array, the consciousness spirit of the glorious underground palace appeared at once. Then, it fiercely collided with her, who was controlling the blood-colored demonic vine. Boom, boom, boom. The two huge creatures collided. In an instant, the huge blood-colored vine was bombarded into pieces amidst a sharp, ear-piercing sound. After all, this was its home ground, but the spirit of the Holy King's tomb was its home ground. The main vine of the blood-colored demonic vine had absorbed its power before, so it was naturally suppressed by it. Ah! On the blood-colored vine, Feng Yuan's beautiful face turned pale. She could feel the main blood-colored vine under her feet shattering. If this continued, the main blood-colored vine would definitely not be able to hold on. At that time, it would be Luo Qingtong's turn to kill her. Thinking so, Feng Wuan suddenly couldn't care about anything else. She hurriedly controlled the broken main blood-colored vine to leave. Looking at her preparing to flee, Luo Qingtong's eyes were cold. She raised her hand, and in an instant, the life and death sword inserted in the center of the array was held in her hand. This life and death sword had absorbed a lot of power from the spirit of the Holy King's tomb. Now that it was held in Luo Qingtong's palm, it was boiling hot. At the same time, in Luo Qingtong's hand, the heart of the thousand-year soul guiding wood had also absorbed a lot of power from the spirit of the Holy King's tomb. At this moment, the strands of power were overflowing from it. Holding these two things, Luo Qingtong's figure suddenly shot up and swept towards Feng Wuan. "Take you Si Huang and leave first." As Luo Qingtong spoke, she slashed out with her sword. Heaven-conquering art. In an instant, the entire exit hall seemed to be illuminated by this sword light. Savage Eternity, Heaven Desolation Sword. Boom boom boom. As the sword slashed out, the entire exit hall and the tomb were on the verge of collapse. The power Luo Qingtong was using at this moment came from the spirit of the glorious underground palace of the Sage King's tomb. This kind of power was terrifying. At the same time, it could easily destroy the material of the tomb. Countless pieces of rubble fell down. At the same time, Luo Qingtong's sword light also slashed on the broken main vine of the blood demon vine. Then, the tail of the sword fiercely swept towards Feng Wuan, who was at the top of the vine. Ah! Looking at the sword slashing towards him, Feng Wuan's heart was in a panic. Luo Qingtong's sword light contained the power of the spirit of the Holy King's tomb, and this blood demon vine couldn't resist it at all. Right at this moment, the consciousness of the green smoke suddenly surged out and took over her body. Idiot! The blue smoke was suppressed back into the depths of Feng Wuan's consciousness by the sudden madness before, and only now did it break free. Seeing this scene, he suddenly shouted out, and then fiercely shouted, "Explode!" As his voice sounded, in an instant, the entire main vine of the blood demon vine exploded. The powerful explosive force blocked Luo Qingtong's sword light. Chapter 1538. Ah! Feng Wuan covered her face. A huge wound was drawn on her face. The wound was drawn directly from her left brow bone to her right face, and then to her entire neck and chest. The white bones, flesh, and fat inside could all be seen. Feng Wuan screamed miserably, and her whole body fell from the sky. Luo Qingtong was about to blast out another attack to kill her. Rumble, the entire exit hall collapsed at this moment. The explosion of the blood demon vine and the bombardment of Luo Qingtong's sword light just now had forcibly collapsed this already crumbling exit hall. At the same time, the entire Holy King's tomb also had a loud bang. All the passageways and rooms collapsed in an instant. This Holy King's tomb palace collapsed. Master! Su Yu and others just came out through the teleportation array and were about to wait outside the Holy King's tomb for Luo Qingtong to come out. As a result, when they turned around, they heard a thunderous roar and were suddenly stunned. Then they rushed to the entrance of the Holy King's tomb like crazy. However, the Holy King's tomb palace collapsed, and the entire entrance was destroyed. They couldn't find a place to go in at all. Master! Standing on a collapsed wilderness open space, Su Yu and others' voices were sorrowful. In the Holy King's tomb, Luo Qingtong felt the underground palace collapse, and suddenly her eyes narrowed. In an instant, she swept the surrounding scene, and then leaped. Bang! Her palm slammed somewhere in the main hall, and in an instant, her feet were empty, and her whole person disappeared from the main hall. Then with a rumble, the entire Holy King's tomb palace collapsed. Cough cough, Luo Qingtong fell into a space, and it was dark all around. She raised her hand to wave away the smoke and dust that filled the air, and then looked up, her eyes flashing with blood, looking at the scene in front of her. This is the secret room that the Holy King's soul mentioned. Luo Qingtong looked around. This was a square room, and the place was not very big. The decorations were very simple. There was a stone table, a stone stool, and a stone bed. There was a brocade box on the stone table. Luo Qingtong walked over, picked it up, and opened it. There was a map neatly stacked inside. Map? Luo Qingtong looked at the map and her eyes lit up. She thought of the map of the land of the fallen immortals that the Saint King's soul had mentioned. Was this the map? Luo Qingtong picked it up, looked at it carefully, and put it into her waist ring. She then discovered that there were a few other things in the brocade box. Among them, there was a gold and iron token, a brass key, and a secret manual. Luo Qingtong took out the secret book and discovered that it was a saint-level cultivation method. The cultivation method recorded in it was enough to let Luo Qingtong advance to the saint realm in the future, all the way to the venerable realm with twice the result with half the effort. At the same time, it also recorded a variety of cultivation methods for the various realms above the saint realm. Luo Qingtong looked at the secret manual and laughed. This secret manual was most likely the treasure of the Holy King realm expert, otherwise, it would not be placed here so cautiously. It was probably waiting for the day when he was reborn, and then he would cultivate again. Chapter 1539. But even so, it was of great use to Luo Qingtong. Luo Qingtong put it away, and then looked at the other two things. She picked up the golden iron token and saw the words, Star Alliance, engraved on the front and Elder, engraved on the back. She immediately raised her eyebrows slightly. Star Alliance, where is that? Luo Qingtong looked at the token and decided to put it away first. What if it came in handy in the future? In any case, it was an elder's token. Finally, Luo Qingtong looked at the brass key. Luo Qingtong's eyes swept around for a while, and determined that there couldn't be any hidden mechanisms in this secret room. Suddenly, holding the brass key felt a little strange. Forget it, I'll put it all away first. Since it was placed here by that Saint King realm expert, it must be something very important to him. Luo Qingtong didn't want to lose her treasure just because she threw it away casually. Thinking of this, she immediately put away the brass key. After putting away all these things, Luo Qingtong began to look around, looking for a way out. The exit and the entrance of this secret room didn't seem to be the same. Moreover, when Luo Qingtong came in, the entire Saint King Tomb Palace had collapsed. This secret room was unscathed, so it was obvious that it wasn't in the underground palace. And the passageway was completely sealed after she came in. So the collapse of the underground palace didn't affect it. Then it should have another way out. As Luo Qingtong thought about it, she immediately started searching around the secret chamber. Fortunately, her pair of blood-red eyes could see in the dark. Otherwise, in such a pitch-black room, unless it was an expert above the saint realm, with a clear mind, and could use divine sense to look outside, who could see what was in this secret room? Let alone find a way out. Luo Qingtong thought so, and suddenly her heart moved slightly. Wait. Clear mind. Saint realm. Luo Qingtong seemed to have grasped something. The saint ruler must have prepared this secret room for himself. The other party was a Saint King realm cultivator, and after being reincarnated, he could directly enter the saint realm. In other words, the way out of this secret room should be prepared for experts above the sage realm. Moreover, it was tailor-made for that Saint King realm master. As Luo Qingtong thought of this, she had a vague guess. Her eyes flickered as she carefully looked around. Soon, she realized that there was something wrong with the wall opposite her. Luo Qingtong walked over and released her mental strength. Soon, she discovered that there seemed to be a faint suction force coming from the wall. The suction force was very weak, but it did exist. Luo Qingtong's expression changed slightly. She raised her hand and placed her palm on it. At the same time, she channeled her power and activated her ocular technique. Soon, she discovered that there seemed to be an array hidden inside. And that array couldn't be activated by ordinary power. It had to be the power of that Saint King Realm Master. And it had to be above the Saint Realm. And it had to be his own power. If Luo Qingtong used the power in the heart of the 1,000-year-old soul guiding wood, circulated it in her body, and then released it, this wall wouldn't recognize it. This was a bit of a trap. Luo Qingtong frowned. She had the power of that Saint King Realm Master, but she hadn't reached the Saint Realm. Didn't that mean that she wouldn't be able to leave until she reached the Saint stage? But now, after Luo Qingtong completely destroyed the small section of the main vine, the blood-colored flower bud was slowly withering without the support of blood qi and death qi. If it wasn't for Little Pig's reminder, Luo Qingtong wouldn't have noticed it. Yes. At this moment, Little Pig had recovered from his weakened state. He jumped out of Luo Qingtong's sleeve and pointed at the blood-red flower. This is the Saint Realm flower. It was born from the essence of countless martial artists. After you consume it, you will immediately break through to the Saint Realm. I didn't expect Feng Wuan to have such a good thing. You're tuning into the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.